Hello, everyone. I'm Steve Kime with the City of Enid. Thank you for joining me today on Ask the Candidate. Our very special guest is Mick Cornett, mayor of, or former mayor, I guess I should say, put former in there, mayor of Oklahoma City. Mick, welcome to Enid. Welcome to the ETN studios.
Good to be back.
We appreciate you being here. Right off the bat, how are you doing? How's the campaign going? Because I can only imagine it's a lot of work.
Well, it is. Occasionally somebody will offer some sympathy because they know the days are long, and then I feel guilty about just how much fun we're having. Good. I mean, it is so interesting. You see so much of the state, and I'd had the good fortune of traveling, through my 20 years in television. So, I'd been to all parts of the state before, sure. But this is different. You're going back and you're visiting and you're talking to people, and you're maybe more than anything else, you're listening, because you want to hear their perspectives about state government. What are their expectations? But I have to just let people know, first of all, it's fun. Once you dedicate the time, it's fun to actually go through the process of running for governor and talking and thinking through issues, trying to visualize how you would react and act, if given the opportunity to serve this great state, and just meeting people that are friendly and care about each other.
Later on in our visit, we'll talk about the different character qualities of Oklahomans. Well, again, we really appreciate you being in Enid today and visiting with us. We know your background as mayor, very high-profile position, and you've done a lot to raise awareness of Oklahoma City across the U.S. with your involvement in mayor's councils and things of this nature. So you're used to having people or challenging people to work together. So under a Cornett administration as governor, how are you going to get people to work together?
Well, I think that's my tool set. I think that's why the business community in this state asked Terry and I to look at this race to begin with. State politics over the last few years has just been so partisan that, generally you have to be far to the left or far to the right to get through the partisan process. And, a guy with my kind of consensus building background probably wouldn't be the first choice or the first person that someone would think of. But once I decided not to run for a fifth term as mayor, the business community was calling in dramatic fashion from Enid, from Tulsa, from Oklahoma City. Please look at this, because suddenly it just seemed like what we need is a consensus builder, a problem solver, someone who can get things done, and those are the skills that I've kind of presented as the mayor of Oklahoma City. I really prided myself in getting things done, and I do think we need that in the state right now. I really think I have something to offer.
Mick, one of the things that we've done is when the candidates come to ETN to visit, we have decided on the select questions. Everybody gets the same question. And when I'm getting ready to ask you this particular question, I'm thinking, well, you can kind of look at his background as mayor and see what he's done in regards to Fortune 100 companies, which leads into the question. You've had this background of really enhancing the look of the state or Oklahoma City for the Fortune 100 and 500 companies to look at Oklahoma City to relocate, or the central part of the state. As governor, what would you do to continue to enhance that opportunity for organizations to move here?
Well, it just gives me an opportunity to do that for the whole state. That's what excites me about it. I do have a lot of experience talking to corporate America about the benefits of doing work and doing business in Oklahoma. Generally, we talk about the low cost of living, which certainly pertains to Enid and northwest Oklahoma and northern Oklahoma. We talk about the lack of traffic congestion. When I'm out in the east and west coast, talking to engineers about moving to Oklahoma, they don't take those things for granted. Even they're used to spending an hour a day each way in their car. And I talk about in Oklahoma, you can live inside a city if you want. You can live in the suburbs if you want, but you can live 15, 20 miles out away from the metropolitan areas or the city, and get to work quickly. And I remember one time when I was talking to some people at Boeing, I mentioned, if you want to live 15 or 20 miles away and have horses and then work inside a city, we have that opportunity. And a little girl ran up and she says, "I get a pony." I don't know if I convinced her parents about that move to Oklahoma, but I convinced her. And at that point, I think, the hard part was done.
Right.
And so, obviously worked with the Oklahoma City Thunder and the NBA to land the NBA franchise. Worked with Dell, right out of the box and out of Austin, and flew down to Round Rock to close that deal. was very involved in Boeing as they shut down facilities in Long Beach and Seattle and Wichita and moved those jobs into Oklahoma. And then, GE, and there's just so many more. I mean, 100,000 jobs in all in the 14 years that I was mayor, and then 10,000 new businesses. And sometimes I think that kind of gets lost because so many of the businesses these days are started by those millennials. Every time I see a millennial with a cell phone, I think, well, they're over there starting a business by themselves. I mean, they're so entrepreneurial. Steve, when you and I were growing up, I don't know about you, but I don't know that I was as well trained in entrepreneurship as these young people are today.
Not hauling hay or being in a hay barn.
Yeah. Well, that's an entrepreneur right there on his time. Certainly, an agricultural business is an entrepreneur, but I guess what I'm saying is these young people are going to take this economy in places we can't imagine today. They're going to be creating jobs 10 years from now that we don't even know exist. And so one of the key attitudes I have toward job creation is to continue to have a state that can attract and keep highly educated 20-somethings. That really ought to be our goal because they're going to be able to do things for our economy that we can't even imagine. That doesn't mean we don't, we don't stop knocking on the doors of big companies, but we need to grow the ones we've got and create a state where young, talented people want to live.
Mick, it's amazing the number of eyes that have watched this past legislative session, and people continue, or I think they're still shaking their heads trying to figure out what has taken place. One of the topics that had really came to the forefront was wasteful spending, particular agency that found X amount of money somewhere. So as governor, what would you do to address really wasteful spending, making sure everyone's good stewards of the funds?
Well, one thing that's not well known, because I didn't talk about it much at the time, but back in 2009, while I was the mayor, I decided to kind of bump up my own personal resume. And I looked around business schools around the country and ended up enrolling in an executive MBA program at New York University. And so I spent 48 weekends over a 2-year period flying to New York and getting an MBA. And a lot of those studies revolved around efficiency, driving efficiencies out of existing organizations and leadership. And I've also been the chair of the audit committee in Oklahoma City. And during that time, we've had 140 performance audits. And performance audits is when you look at an organization and you're not auditing their books, you're not auditing their finances, you're auditing the way they do things. And you're trying to see how we can design a better and more efficient operation. And so we did that 140 times as I was involved in an oversight position at the audit committee. We also audit every department every year. And it amazes me that in this day and age, the state government doesn't have that same expectation. I mean, the expectation for transparency and the expectation of people, being responsible, like the issues that you're talking about there, are only rising. And for the state to be so far behind in those expectations, it's disappointing. And you mentioned people shaking their heads. I've had, and my wife Terry has had too. We've had people cry on our shoulders. Just because they love this state so much and they're just so disappointed at the level of leadership we're getting at the Capitol.
Thank you for joining us again today on Ask the Candidate. Our special guest, Mick Cornett, a candidate for governor here in the great state of Oklahoma. Mick, just a few moments ago, you were talking about how you were traveling across the state, and of course you've been across the state previously, but you're getting another look or another revisit to a lot of communities, and you realize that Oklahoma is a very diverse state, even geographically when you look at Woodward, Boise City to Hugo and every point in between. And the fabric of Oklahomans, very salt of the earth type individuals, and the character that they possess. And especially our farmers here in northwestern Oklahoma dealing with storms, fires, just really strong individuals.
Yeah. That's
a long way to say or to ask you, the character, the values that you bring into the governor's office would be what? Well,
I'm a fifth generation Oklahoman, but the first to not be a wheat farmer. My family is from western Oklahoma. And raising wheat. My parents, my grandparents, and my great-grandparents are all buried in a cemetery next to a wheat field in western Oklahoma today. And I was just there on Memorial Day to put flowers on their graves. And so that history, that salt of the earth aspect of my background is. When you're running for governor, you think about a lot of those things. And I didn't mention, I guess I shouldn't leave them out, my great-great-grandparents are buried next to a wheat field in a different county in western Oklahoma. So, I mean, I have really deep roots here. And my mother, to her dying day, would talk to me about the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression and, and life on a farm that was a really, really difficult experience. And so my takeaway from all of that and what you're talking about is there's nothing wrong with the DNA of Oklahoma. I mean, we've been through a lot. We're hardy people. We care about each other. That may be the one common denominator that I see amongst every Oklahoman that I've encountered. But we've just had too low standards for ourselves in health and education. We've got to have higher standards. And I look at the governor's position as the lone person who can control the narrative and set the tone for the state. And I intend to be the champion for health and education 12 months a year. I don't intend to be a governor that's only pertinent during session and on a policy issue. I want to be the governor that's out there talking to Oklahoma about how we can be better.
Mick, we have 2 more questions, and if you could touch on these, because I do want to give you an opportunity to speak to the folks that are watching, give you that opportunity to speak from your heart. Real quick, medical marijuana, the people that talk to me about it, they're confused. They don't quite understand what's on the ballot. I think it's House Bill 788. They're not sure what's in it. There's confusing. Can you just kind of share with us your
Well, it is confusing. I mentioned earlier that the one common denominator Oklahomans have is that they care about each other. And I think like a lot of other people, when we first thought of medical marijuana, we immediately empathized with a parent who might have a child who we think their suffering might be touched by medical marijuana. And there's other people that believe it has great medicinal qualities. I don't pretend to know, other than, we want to help each other. And so I was, more than open-minded when the initiative petition first emerged. But disappointingly, this is a very lax and very loose piece of legislation. I'm not sure the legislature could fix it if it passes. And so my preference would be that we vote this one down and then they come back with another bill or another initiative petition through the process that takes care of the issues that we're trying to do. We're trying to help people, but tightens up some of the loopholes in the current legislation. So I'm going to vote no. But overall, I want to see medicinal marijuana have an impact in Oklahoma and help make people better.
Mick, as you know, Oklahoma is definitely an energy state, but it's also, sometimes people lose sight, this is a military state.
Yeah.
Big military state.
It sure is.
And you've got the new, I believe, new general at Tinker. Vance is here, Altus, but also wind energy. As you've traveled the state, I'm sure you've noticed an increase of wind turbines across the state. And the issue that's near and dear to us here in Northwest Oklahoma and Enid and Vance is the wind turbines, making sure they're far enough away from our training facilities. There's an issue with an Air Force base in Texas that there's been a little conflict there. Your views on how we can make everybody happy?
Well, we've got to make everybody happy. I guess that's the short answer. I mean, the wind energy has certainly made large investments in the state. They're producing jobs, and there's no question there's long-term there's an economic benefit, and as you mentioned, it is part of the diversification of the state's economy. But I've spent a lot of trips to the Pentagon and in D.C. Fighting for Oklahoma bases since I was the mayor of Oklahoma City. And I understand what they're looking for. They want local communities that can be a partner to their local bases, and that's largely the reason we haven't been touched by the BRAC policies of the past. That and Senator Inhofe does a really good job of looking after us. But Enid, Altus, McAllister, Oklahoma City, and we could go on and on with all the military installations. But the point is that the local communities here value that relationship. I understand it's an issue. I think it's an issue we can work out. I'm not overly worried about it, other than I acknowledge it's something we do have to work out.
And we want to remind everyone the primary is coming up on June 26th, Tuesday. Please have that red letter day on your calendar and make sure that you get out and vote. Mick, again, we appreciate you stopping by here at the studio here in Enid. And I just want to give you an opportunity, and I typically say speak from the heart, but I want you to speak to the camera there and just talk to the folks at home and just take your time.
Well, I appreciate it, and of course Enid is very close to my heart. I spent 20 years at Channel 5, and Channel 5 actually had its beginnings in Enid at KGEO in the mid-1950s. So there are probably some longtime Enid residents that remember those days that actually predated my arrival on television. But to a certain extent, I feel a very keen sense of of commonality amongst people that live in Oklahoma. I spent 20 years in television talking to people and dealing with issues, largely sports, but also in the news. But I think I have a really firm grasp of what Oklahoma's about and what we can do. My wife and I have traveled the state. Obviously, we've done every state highway you can imagine. We haven't talked infrastructure in this interview, Steve, so I should probably mention how important investing in infrastructure is. I have a lot of experience creating jobs in this state, and I know for a fact that if I'm going to be bringing in some outside capitalist and implying I want them to invest in Oklahoma, when I show them the road in whatever part of the state we're in, that road better be in good shape. If it's a crumbling road, they're gonna say, well, how do you expect me to invest here when you haven't invested here? And there's an 8-year plan that ODOT has in place. We just need to make sure we completely fund that 8-year plan. The public sector has to lead the way on infrastructure, so the private sector can create jobs. We also haven't talked about criminal justice reform, but that's another really important aspect of Oklahoma's future. I think we should all be embarrassed that we're #1 in women incarceration and nearly #1 in men incarceration. We can do better than that. It's extremely expensive to go down the road that we're doing, and it's taking tax dollars away that could be spent on other things like education and health. And education and health are my priorities. I just think we've had too low standards in this state. There's nothing wrong with the DNA of Oklahoma, but we've got to expect more of ourselves. And I will be the governor that champions health and education for this entire state. And with my television background and my experience of being the champion in Oklahoma City, I will take my on-air skills nationwide and try to raise the status and raise the expectations of Oklahoma worldwide. I think I can really do a good job of selling the benefits of people doing business here, and I look forward to representing Enid and the rest of the state. But first, I need your vote on June 26th. So, Steve, thanks for the opportunity.
You're welcome. It's our pleasure. So, Mick, thank you again.
You bet.
I know you're a busy guy, and we just appreciate you making time for us today.
Well, can't wait to be back, and we can do something down the line.
Very good. And thank you for joining us today on Ask the Candidate. Again, as Mick said, keep in mind, June 26th. It's always a Tuesday, and that's a very important date here in the state of Oklahoma, so get out and vote. Again, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your time today. I'm Steve Kime with the City of Enid. Until next time, make it a great day, and thanks for watching.